Welcome to Voice Daily Finance, the most important news personalized for you every day. Supported by Voice.com.
After listening to today's news, you'll know first, Putin challenges US sanctions on India, highlighting America's own dependency on Russian nuclear fuel. So we'll discuss why this geopolitical challenge undermines US sanctions and what it means for global energy alliances and de-dollarization efforts. Second, UK real incomes for the poor fall to a 20-year low despite official data showing wage growth. We'll explore how this vibe session is fueled by soaring essential costs, threatening to entrench a two-tiered economy and limit long-term growth. Third, $6.25 billion from Michael Dell fuels Trump's baby bonds plan, sparking debate over wealth inequality. We'll examine how a potential savings trap in college financial aid rules may impact the program's success and penalise low-income families. Russian President Vladimir Putin just called out the United States on the world stage, and his words are creating a major geopolitical shockwave. His question: if the United States itself still buys Russian nuclear fuel, why shouldn't India have the same privilege? Interestingly enough, Putin isn't just making a rhetorical point. The data actually backs him up, revealing a significant US dependency on Russia for its civilian nuclear power. Research from the US Energy Information Administration shows that in 2023, Russia supplied about 27% of the enriched uranium used in American nuclear reactors. Even after President Biden signed a law in May 2024 to ban these imports, in 2024, Russia remained the top supplier, providing 20% of the enriched uranium used in the US. So the thing is, this strategic vulnerability limits Washington's ability to apply full economic pressure and gives Putin the leverage to make such a public challenge. This direct challenge comes as Washington pressures Delhi with tariffs reaching 50% on many Indian products to halt its purchase of Russian energy. A while back, we talked about Washington's transactional tariff diplomacy and how it can be used to force compliance. We also noted that India's biggest private refiner, Reliance, preemptively halted Russian crude purchases ahead of US, divided by EU sanctions timelines. The latest development is Russia pushing back against that pressure, promising India uninterrupted shipments of fuel. We're now seeing a fascinating duality. On one side, the deep discounts on Russian oil are incredibly attractive for a country with massive energy needs. Data shows that in April 2025, India's imports of Russian crude peaked at around 2.1 million barrels per day, making up a staggering 40% of its total imports. On the other, facing US pressure, Indian refiners have become more cautious. By September 2025, those imports had dropped to about 1.6 million barrels per day. Since Reliance hit pause a while back, that internal caution helps explain the slide. And as we discussed earlier, the shift also squeezes refining margins. Asian gasoline margins fell from $12 to $8 a barrel, creating an inflationary headwind that complicates the Reserve Bank of India's job and puts pressure on the rupee. But that's not the whole picture. The real turning point is a massive economic program the two nations just laid out, valid until 2030. The goal? To skyrocket bilateral trade from $60 billion to $100 billion in the coming years. And they are backing this up by building concrete infrastructure to make it happen. A key part of this vision is the International North-South Transport Corridor, or INSTC. This is a massive 7,200 kilometre network of ships, railways and roads connecting India, Iran, Azerbaijan and Russia. It's a potential game changer because studies show this route is about 30% cheaper and 40% shorter than the traditional route through the Suez Canal. This isn't just a trade route, it's a new Eurasian economic corridor designed to challenge existing global trade flows. The deal includes new visa schemes for tourism, agreements on shipbuilding, and investments in civil nuclear energy. Russia is even set to help build India's largest nuclear power plant. This isn't just a trade negotiation, it's a strategic realignment. The leaders explicitly stated their partnership is being reoriented toward joint research, development, and the production of advanced defense platforms. Now, get this, while India deepens its defense ties with Russia, it is simultaneously trying to maintain its strategic partnership with the United States. It's a classic case of not putting all your eggs in one basket. For example, even after the US imposed tariffs over the Russian oil issue, the US State Department approved a $93 million sale of advanced missile systems to India. This shows that despite the friction, the US-India defense trade, which has grown to nearly $25 billion, remains resilient. It tells us India is pursuing a multi-alignment strategy, trying to be a friend to both sides to maximize its own strategic autonomy. It all culminates in their stated goal of using the BRICS alliance to promote a more just and multipolar world, a direct challenge to the economic power of North America and Western European nations. A key test for this multipolar ambition is the effort to move away from the US dollar. Russia and India have been trying to settle their trade in their own currencies, the ruble and the rupee. The goal is to create a parallel financial system that isn't subject to US sanctions. Actually, implementing this has proven very difficult. Indian banks are reportedly overcautious about handling these transactions, fearing they could be cut off from business in North America and Europe. This highlights a major hurdle for the BRICS de-dollarization dream. The dollar's dominance is not just a matter of policy, but is deeply embedded in the global financial system. While some Indian firms are reportedly reducing oil imports to comply with US sanctions, the message from Moscow and Delhi is clear. As we highlighted earlier, Reliance was the first big mover, and that corporate-led de-risking signaled where the pressure points would be. This is more than a transaction for fuel. It's the forging of a major economic and strategic bloc, signaling a significant power shift on the global stage. So what's next? We should keep a close eye on a few key indicators. First, the monthly volume of India's Russian oil purchases will be a direct measure of how well this balancing act is holding up against US pressure. Second, watch for any breakthroughs or continued struggles in the rupee-ruble payment system, as this is a real-world test of the BRICS' ability to challenge the dollar's dominance. Third, monitor Reliance's procurement stance and the trajectory of Asian refining margins we flagged earlier. They're fast-moving gauges of both compliance pressure and inflation risk. Finally, pay attention to the flow of high-tech and defense trade between India and the United States. Continued deals will signal that the strategic partnership is weathering these geopolitical storms. We were just talking about the pressures of global economic strategy, but sometimes the biggest economic battles are fought at home. That's certainly the case in the UK right now, where official data suggests UK wages are finally catching up with inflation, but that number is hiding a brutal reality. For the poorest households in Britain, real incomes are now lower than they were 20 years ago. This isn't just a feeling, it's a story of two different economies. While headline inflation averages out, the cost of essentials like food, rent, and energy has skyrocketed. You see, the official inflation number, the Consumer Price Index or CPI, is just an average. What you actually buy determines your personal inflation rate. According to official statistics, essentials like housing and household services make up a massive 30.1% of the inflation calculation basket, with food adding another 9%. So when the prices of these specific items stay stubbornly high, it doesn't matter if the overall headline number is falling. This creates what some economists call a vibe session, where the official data looks better, but people feel worse off because their daily costs are still crushing them. These are the very items that consume the largest share of income for lower earning households, hitting them with a double blow of the sharpest price hikes and the weakest wage growth. This income-wealth disconnect breaks the traditional "a rising tide lifts all boats" model, but the pressure doesn't stop there. The dream of home ownership is evaporating for an entire generation. Believe it or not, a recent survey showed that 42% of young adults who don't own a home have completely given up on the idea of buying one in the next decade. Even among those earning a solid £60,000 a year, 38% have lost hope. The house price to income ratio has more than doubled since the 1990s, with first-time buyers today paying a staggering 191% more than their parents did for a home. This chronic housing unaffordability is no longer just a social issue, it's becoming a primary drag on the entire UK economy. It limits labour mobility, preventing people from moving for better jobs, and it delays household formation, which in turn hurts consumer spending. Years of easy money have turned property into a financial asset for global investors, pushing prices further out of reach for ordinary people. What's really different this time is that, unlike in past economic cycles, lowering interest rates may no longer stimulate the real economy through a housing wealth effect. Instead, it might just make the rich richer by inflating asset prices, worsening wealth inequality without helping ordinary people get on the property ladder. This is where the situation takes a more complex turn, because it's not just the young or the poor feeling the pressure. Middle and high income earners who pay an unusually large share of the UK's tax take are also feeling the squeeze. Taxes in the UK rise more steeply with income than in almost any other country, yet public services like the NHS are strained to the breaking point. This has created a dangerous negative feedback loop. Years of underinvestment in public health, the UK spends a smaller share of its GDP on health than France or Germany, have led to poorer health outcomes. This, in turn, is shrinking the labour force, with official data showing a record 2.5 million people are now economically inactive due to long-term illness. A smaller workforce means lower tax revenues, which further constrains the government's ability to invest. The UK has fewer practicing doctors and dentists per person than most of its European peers. At the same time, the tax system is becoming a trap. For example, due to the way personal allowances are withdrawn, high earners in the £100,000 to £125,000 bracket face a shocking 60% effective marginal tax rate. This creates a real risk of capital and talent flight, especially post-Brexit, as financial centres in the EU and Asia actively court the UK's most mobile taxpayers. This sets up a high-stakes dilemma. To fund the investment needed for better public services and economic growth, the government may need to demand even higher taxes. The country is now caught between a public demanding relief and the stark economic reality that the solutions required may only increase the financial pressure. So, what's next? The key insight is that this is a structural problem that can't be fixed by simple monetary policy alone. Politically difficult choices about tax structures and deep public service reforms are unavoidable. In the near term, we should keep a close eye on indicators like labour force participation rates and consumer confidence. These will be the crucial signs telling us whether the UK is starting to break out of this trap or sinking deeper into it. Speaking of wealth inequality and the struggle for younger generations to get ahead, a very different approach is being tried in the United States, backed by a huge name in tech. Tech entrepreneur Michael Dell is injecting $6.25 billion into a controversial new government savings plan. The program, known as Trump Accounts, is part of US President Donald Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act. So the thing is, this initiative is essentially a large-scale test of what are called baby bonds. The US Treasury will deposit $1,000 of seed money for every child born between 2025 and 2028. The money will be placed in a custodial account managed by a parent and invested in low-cost tax-deferred index funds. When the child turns 18, this account converts into a traditional IRA, which has standard rules about when you can withdraw the money. The program is set to launch around mid-2026. Dell's massive pledge then adds another $250 for 25 million children in lower income areas. And the potential numbers are staggering. One financial planner calculates that with maximum annual contributions of $5,000, that initial seed money could balloon into a portfolio worth nearly $700,000 by the time a child turns 28. That figure is based on historical market returns and assumes consistent investment. However, if you zoom out, you'll see a major caveat. The key question is, who can actually afford to make those $5,000 annual contributions? After all, research on similar tax advantage savings programs shows that higher income households are far better positioned to contribute the maximum amount. This has led some analysts to worry that the program, while intended to be universal, could inadvertently become another tool for the wealthy to accumulate wealth with tax advantages, potentially widening the wealth gap rather than closing it. But not everyone is convinced. One certified financial planner warns the mechanics matter more than the slogan. Another analyst from Yale's Budget Lab calls the help broad and shallow rather than targeted and large. What's really at play here is a concept from behavioral economics. The program is designed as a nudge. The free money is meant to encourage people to start saving. However, it's missing key features that have been proven to work. For example, there's no automatic enrollment and no immediate matching of contributions from the government or an employer. By comparison, a savings program in the UK called Help to Save offered a 50% bonus on savings. While it did help some people, overall participation was much lower than expected. This suggests that a simple nudge isn't always enough to build a new habit, especially for families struggling to make ends meet. And behind the scenes, a battle is brewing. Public records show financial firms are scrambling to grab a piece of the program, with the world's largest asset managers lobbying the Treasury to create a competitive marketplace for managing these millions of new accounts. This decision brings both the potential for lower fees through competition and the inherent risk of creating a massive government-created fee opportunity for Wall Street. The financial industry, including giants like BlackRock and Vanguard, is arguing that allowing many different companies to offer these accounts will create competition, The alternative is the government picking a single federal provider. The Treasury's decision will determine how much of the investment growth goes to the child versus how much goes to management fees. The question of who will control this massive new pool of capital is far from settled. The debate boils down to a single critical point. While the government and philanthropic seed money is a powerful nudge, experts say the program's true success will not be measured by the initial deposit. The real impact will come from whether families develop the habit of contributing regularly. So, what should we watch for next? What really brings this to a head is a potential savings trap built into this system. The US government uses a form called the FAFSA to determine how much financial aid a student gets for college. Money saved in a student's own name is counted much more heavily against them than money saved in a parent's name. If these Trump accounts are treated as a student asset, a lower income family that saves diligently could find their child's financial aid package reduced. This could completely undermine the program's goal. The upcoming guidance from the government on how these accounts will be treated for financial aid purposes will be a crucial focal point to watch.
That's it for today on Voice Daily Finance. Follow, share, and stay tuned for daily updates coming your way tomorrow.